I think everybody probably knows you who would be watching or listening to this, but if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, totally happy to be here, and thanks for inviting me. My name is Nader. I'm a developer of about 12 years. About 9 or 10 of that have been partially focused on developer education in some capacity, either as a teacher, a trainer, or in developer relations. And I've been in the blockchain space for about 3 years or a little over 3 years. The previous 9 years, I was in the cloud or mobile space, but not working on blockchains at all. So I think that in this 3 years, I've changed jobs 4 times or worked with like different teams, and currently and hopefully for the next long term, working with EigenLayer.
Awesome. Yeah, I saw because I remember when you were working with Lens, and then I saw you move to EigenLayer. Can you explain EigenLayer, like do an LE5? Explain it to me like I'm five.
Yeah, so I mean, for me, I've been like I said, I have moved quite often in this last 3 years, but my last role before joining in the blockchain space, I was with AWS for 3.5 years, and I really enjoyed being and sticking somewhere for that long and being able to like just dive deep and kind of deeply understand some of the things that took just take a while to kind of get there. But I'm also the type that doesn't want to like stick around if I feel like something isn't working out. So I think like it's taken me a few years to really understand like what I want. And I think I understand pretty well at this point. There's probably a handful of teams that I would really love to work with. And thankfully I was able to kind of work with one of them here at EigenLayer. But EigenLayer is basically a protocol that allows developers to build arbitrary decentralized networks that are secured by Ethereum. So the basic like TLDR of maybe how to explain that a little differently is Ethereum and smart contract blockchains allow developers to easily write smart contract applications and deploy those. And if you deploy a smart contract to Ethereum, you're essentially inheriting the, hundreds of millions of dollars of secure economic stake, I guess, now that Ethereum is on proof of stake, that secures the whole network. But if you want to build an oracle or if you want to build a side chain or you want to build anything that is a proof of stake network, you in the past have had to basically start from scratch and start over and kind of rebuild what Ethereum is. You bootstrap the validators, you get the stakers, you launch a token, blah, blah, blah. But with EigenLayer, you can allow developers, or not developers, you can allow people who are staking their ETH to then restake that ETH to secure arbitrary applications or networks by using EigenLayer. So what that really allows developers to do is say, okay, I want to build this network. It can be a general like network that we think are going to be used by tons of people, or it can be something very specialized. But either way, I don't want to go through the whole process of bootstrapping all that security from scratch. So I'm going to tap into EigenLayer and I'm going to allow the stakers who are already staking on EigenLayer to restake. And therefore, they're continuing to earn their yield from staking as an ETH staker, but then they're earning additional yield from all of these different networks that are running on EigenLayer, which we call AVSs.
I'm coming from Orbis, and Orbis used to be like a Web3 social SDK. So obviously, when like Lens was a big part of the conversation, or for us, and in general. So I wanted to know, like, are you still involved in Lens?
Yeah, I still consider myself kind of like a contributor. I still maintain a few open source libraries. I still use Lens all the time. I still think that Web3 social and SocialFi in general is kind of like the most has the most potential, I guess, for something in this space to be a consumer facing,
Yeah.
like widely adopted use case. So really bullish on all of the social stuff, definitely including Lens. I decided, to spend a year and a half of my life working very closely with that team. And yeah, I'm still involved.
You just mentioned something that how like social Web3 social is kind of like the only use case right now in Web3 where you're like you can really see the potential for the consumer. And I think like one of the criticisms of like Web3 is kind of that everybody is building infrastructure for developers, but nobody's really building anything for consumers. What would you say about that?
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. It's definitely been one of my criticisms, but it's also something that is a little more nuanced than that because in reality, we need both. I think that with the traditional Web2 space, we've been extremely spoiled. If you look at some of the conversations that are happening there in terms of developer tooling, they're making incremental improvements because everything already kind of works. If I want to go build something, I can literally pick up a framework, a database, scale it to hundreds of millions of users without me being a super deeply technical like infrastructure engineer because I can leverage cloud services. But if I want to do the same thing in the Web3 space, we actually are not there yet on the front end and client side tooling. We're also not yet that you're yet there on the back end infrastructure. So I think that, but I think we have seen an over index on building infrastructure simply because it's so much easier to raise money. If I want to build a consumer facing app, it's 100 times harder. It's harder to raise money. I have so much respect for everyone building anything that's consumer facing regardless if I like what they're doing or if they're competing with something I'm doing or if they haven't done it the way I would have done it. And I still have like enormous respect and appreciation for all those people doing that. For instance, like Tech was launched recently, and you have all these people that just come out of the woodwork criticizing, their like implementation. I like have obviously my own thoughts about how I would have done it, but it doesn't really matter. Like that person is actually in there doing the work, shipping something, putting it out there in the public, facing that criticism. I think that we need more of that. And I am happy to see that there are like success stories now happening like in that space. So Warpcast and Farcaster, Lens, Tech, there's CyberConnect. A lot of these teams are actually raising a lot of money right now. And I think like when we start seeing that these fundraisers announced publicly, we'll hopefully see this will spur more of the consumer facing applications to be built.
Yeah. I feel like I've felt the same, like, there's so much, people are building a lot of infrastructure, but I also feel like Web3 is, like, in its infancy, and it's not super accessible for developers right now to, like, be able to build consumer products. So, it makes sense to me that people are improving the infrastructure, but then again, there's also that, like, oversaturation of infrastructure maybe where it's, like, there's so many different types of infrastructure and everybody's building something, and, it's hard to, like, really reach those, like, network effects and have that decentralization aspect of it where, like, everybody's kind of, like, building on I guess what I'm thinking about more is about, like, interoperability. Like you mentioned, I think Warpcast is super interesting to
Yeah, I
hear.
think that they're a really good example of a team that have kind of made the right trade offs between what can be done and what can be done, and therefore, like we're gonna use certain centralized, um, or we're gonna take like these we're gonna make these decisions that might not be 100% like Web3 blockchain ethos types of things, but they're gonna provide a good trade-off based on what's available like today. And I think that they've made a lot of those decisions over time that have resulted in a high quality polished product that is approachable and really fun to use for just anyone that has never interacted with a blockchain before. And I think that that's the right approach right now. I think that there's people that are kind of like extremists on both ends. Some people like hate blockchains, and then some people are like so maxis that they think nothing there's no trade-off that should be made. Everyone should have a wallet with their own private key and all this stuff, EOAs and all. And then you have like in between, which is kind of the sweet spot for actually building something useful, I think, right now. And I think that Warpcast, Farcaster team, they've made a lot of tough decisions that have resulted in a high quality polished product. Also, the team behind it is just really, really good. They work at Coinbase. They're just what you would consider some of the top level like engineers in the space. So they're focused on, solving like this problem of building like a polished consumer facing app, and they've done an excellent job. And yeah, I think that it's a good example of the types of trade-offs that other people might make if they want to build something that gets this similar adoption and um, can kind of copy some of the ideas that they've implemented.
Do you think we'll ever reach like a time in the near future where you don't need to like make trade-offs, or do you think that's like a long time out?
I always feel like due to the limitations of decentralized networks that there'll probably always be, some type of trade-off just due to, like, physics. But I think we can get to the point where it doesn't really matter all that much, because we'll, have good enough, like, infrastructure and, the trade-offs won't really be that impactful to the end users, and the security trade-offs won't really matter all that much because they will be hopefully very minimal.
It's hard to talk about Web3 without talking about blockchains. I was wondering, what are your thoughts on like Solana versus EVM, and what do you think is a more attractive like experience for developers like at this point in time?
Yeah, it's interesting discussion at this point in time versus like the same discussion 5 years ago, because I feel like there is so much content information and, just people that have built on the EVM over the past X number of years that not only is it easier to find an answer and to kind of solve a problem that you might run into when writing Solidity, but you also now have all of these high quality AI tools that provide a result based on the quality of the existing content that was already out there. So if you are a new developer and you want to write a function that takes an input and returns some type of output, and you don't know how to write that, you can basically ask ChatGPT or one of these how to do that in Solidity, and it's going to give you the answer. But if you're using one of these newer VMs, you're probably not going to actually get that answer. So then you have to go do a lot more work. And I think like you have this snowball effect where the EVM is just essentially taken all of this adoption, and the new AI stuff is going to make it even harder for other people to pick up. EVM has tons of like trade-offs and things that are not that great about it and are not that fun to write. So people are building like these other alt VMs, I guess you could say, that are faster or better. Maybe not always so faster because I think people are building pretty fast and performant EVM implementations, but they're just like more fun to just write the code and like a better developer experience that are obviously better languages, but like whether or not they're going to catch up is just kind of yet to be seen. I think Move has a possible, you know, can possibly be one of those. I think if the SVM continues to improve, like their tooling and like their developer experience, it also has a possibility to catch up. But I do feel like some of these more siloed things, like, oh, you have to learn all of this language, tooling, and everything, and you can only build for this network, are going to be very hard to catch up because it's all about like developer adoption. And if you can cast the widest net, you're going to have the most people building and the more like likelihood of something popping off on your chain because you just have that broader net. So, but yeah, I would say I am kind of bullish on the EVM mainly because of the all the existing knowledge base that's out there and how much easier it is for developers to find answers and ship things more quickly. So
Yeah, it kind of has like it already has the network effect like for this space. Um, it's just like the automatic thing that you would go to, even if something is like, even if something else might be like technically better in some way, it's like automatically you like Ethereum, um, which makes sense. You started in Web 2, um, and you gained like some, I don't know, notoriety is not the right word, but like you gained a following that way. I was wondering like, what was it about Web3 that attracted you? Was there like one point when you just decided to make the pivot to Web3, and did it feel like a risk at the time?
yeah, there was definitely a defining moment. It was almost like a 24 or 48-hour period of time from when I started diving in to when I was just so pilled on everything that I just did not want to work in my job anymore that I was in. Um, I was I was actually like at AWS and I was already kind of bored and I wouldn't say depressed, but I wasn't like happy with with where I was maybe. Um, Not because my life wasn't like extremely comfortable, but just because like my mind was bored with what I was doing and things like that. and I was actually being promoted to an L7 at AWS, which would have really kicked up my salary, made me almost too comfortable to ever leave. So I think that I was just curious and was out there like looking at stuff, and I came across a couple of talks from Yaniv Tal at the Graph, and then also Juan Benet, which IPFS Filecoin, about Web3. And like within like a day or two, I was completely just mind blown and deep in down this whole rabbit hole of like Web3 stuff. And I knew I wanted to work in this space. And I kind of made the choice in my head. I'm going to quit my job if I find anyone that will hire me. So I spent the next week like diving into different areas and trying to find where I might fit in. And I ultimately, you know, basically went to the Graph's website and applied because I knew GraphQL really well, and I had assumed that that would be the only like company that would hire me because I knew nothing about anything other than GraphQL. And they gave me a shot. And yeah, I actually made a lot, like, you know, less than half of what I was making, maybe in terms of guaranteed comp with my new job versus what I was making at AWS. So it wasn't like the easiest conversation to have with my family, especially my mom and dad. My wife pretty supportive and trust me because I've made a lot of these crazy decisions in the past that have turned out okay. But my parents are very skeptical at the time. But yeah, I think like now 3 years later, I'm extremely happy, and I've also almost like have a little bit of like a bitter feeling towards a lot of the people that I used to be very tied into in different communities in Web 2 because of all of the vocal like hatred from some of these people during like like 2022, 2023 time when Web 3 became like really popular. um there were a lot of people that were just like literally working at terrible companies like I mean, I'm not gonna say terrible companies, but companies that were doing very what I would say like bad things. Um and they were being completely like critical of the whole space while not acknowledging all of the shit that was happening at their company. I just thought it was so hypocritical. Um and it just made me just kind of like realize I never want to work like with any of these people ever again. And it made me even double down even more like into this space because it feels like there's just you know, I don't know. I feel like more community almost in this space.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, you were talking about like the that like 2022, 2023 like time in Web3. They were just like very like good developers and like knew understood technology and understood what Web3 was, and they were just like kind of jumping on the bandwagon of hating everything about Web3 because they were like monkey pictures. Um and I thought it was like interesting because I think a lot of the people, oh, well, there's a lot of reprehensible things that happen in Web 2. Like, it is not like going from this like squeaky clean, everything is lovely culture to going to like crypto and NFTs and like scams.
A lot of these people were working at companies like Facebook and Google, which at the time and even now are, you know, have just countless documented things that they've done that are
Like major
beyond,
violation.
yeah. So it's like, and that those seem to be the most vocal people, which made me just like even more put off by
Yeah.
just in general about the whole space.
I was like kind of skeptical about was like, I was like, these people understand like the problems in Web 2. Some of the ones that I'm thinking of were like very aware and like critical of Web 2, but like couldn't accept that decentralization and like open data and stuff were a really good solution to a lot of the problems that Web 2 had. And I was skeptical about the reasoning behind that because I was just like, I know they understand that it is a solution to that
I
problem.
think it just was like it was almost like a political thing at some point. Like it was kind of like how politics will make someone pick a side just because their friends are doing it or whatever. Like people were literally like working at companies that had contracts with ICE and all these other government contractors that literally were just doing terrible things while simultaneously signing a document. I think there was like some document that was going around like condemning like blockchains or something. It was just bizarre behavior. And like when you called them out on it, they basically just wouldn't have any, they just wouldn't have any way to defend what their company was doing. Not that not that I defend all the terrible like scams and stuff in the blockchain space. So for someone to kind of condemn an entire like type of database based on like crazy usage of it, it just was like bizarre discussions that were just happening. So
Yeah, I kind of feel like that culture of just like hating Web3 for the sake of it is sort of what's preventing people in Web2 from being more open to like knowing what we're doing in Web3, because a lot of what we're doing in Web3 would be really useful for what they're doing in Web2. Like when your company that you're working for is like, like rigging elections and sort of like just like creating tons of doing tons of horrible things, like having contracts with ICE, like you said, and like just like doing like the most reprehensible stuff and being like, I know like Web3 is a scam. So it's weird. I feel like we're in a weird time.
yeah.
So I was reading something you wrote, a Substack post that you wrote about like growing developer communities. Um, and you mentioned a lot about like building bridges.
But yeah, it's been basically like the core of my like philosophy as a developer, but also as a developer educator, that that kind of was already something that I felt like I believed in and that I was doing and also appreciating other people doing. But it was like I went to, so for, well, to get kind of go back, I learned how to code by basically doing YouTube videos. So I'm a self-taught developer, and most of actually everything I learned wasn't through like a university. Other than when I was 17, I took an HTML course in community college, but didn't start coding until I was like 10, 12 years later. But everything I learned was like YouTube videos, blog posts, open source. So, and I went from making literally like minimum wage type of jobs into getting a career as a developer, which was a complete change in lifestyle and change of like life. So I had this overwhelming appreciation of all of those people that had put all that stuff out there for me. And at the time, it was insane that I could go online and find all of this free, valuable information that improved my life substantially, that people were just giving away for free because I didn't really understand anything at the time about this space. And I think like after getting a job and learning and being able to kind of um, explain the things that I'd learned in a way that I thought was a little bit simpler, I wanted to start doing the same thing that all those other people had done. So I started doing a little bit of like writing, a little bit of open sourcing and stuff. And then I went to this conference where this guy gave a talk called Building Bridges or Bridge Building or something like that. And he and everything he said just like resonated with me so much that it kind of became more of a focus for what I actually want to do and how I feel that people can make an impact. And it actually translates really well to developer relations because you want to build relationships, you want to help people, you want to make an impact, you want people to know who you are. And I think like following that philosophy of bridge building does all of that for you, and it's just a fulfilling thing to do. So, but the basic idea is just helping people, teaching, taking time out of your day to answer questions without expecting a return. If you're in DevRel, it means helping people that are working on other things than maybe the thing that you're getting paid to promote, and just being a helpful person that's publicly sharing everything they're doing. You might call that building in public. You might call that learning in public, but yeah, I think that that's kind of been my philosophy of, my whole career, and I think I've had a lot of people have told me that it's helped them, but also it's really helped me. I mean, I think if, you know, if even if you do it for selfish reasons, it's, like, not a bad, like, way to operate if you are doing anything that is outward facing.
I can see that like being a huge part of your like personal ethos, like the way that you carry. I think that that's also like a big part of like why you've like gained such a big like following, is because I think a lot of people see that and people want to share knowledge. And I think that like, and I think knowledge should be shared and it should be free and it should be like owned. It shouldn't be owned by anyone. It should be owned by everyone. And I think like we do like as humans kind of have this natural desire to share knowledge with others. And yeah, I think like sometimes like putting a paywall in front of that, it takes some of the humanity out of like community and building online. I'm going to ask you some like rapid fire, this or that type questions.
Sure.
Um, we already just sort of discussed this, but Solana or Ethereum?
If I have to just choose one, I have to say Ethereum, and
Good.
it's like surrounding ecosystem, but also like Solana. So
Choose both. Rust or TypeScript?
both, but TypeScript because I know it better.
Dubai or Singapore?
I've never visited Singapore, but I do love Dubai, so I'm just going to say Dubai, even though that's probably an unpopular opinion.
Yeah, I think a lot of people love Dubai. AI or crypto?
Crypto.
Thank you so much for everything. It was really interesting talking to you and like getting to know you more and just yeah, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with others and building bridges. Um
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to come on and chat with you anytime, and I'll always enjoy hanging out and talking to you. So thanks for the invite.